Okay, hi everyone. My name is Iggy Moon, and my pronouns are they, them. And I'm the chair of the MOU on conversion therapy. Um, I'd like to introduce Carolyn Mercer in a moment. I just want to give a very brief description, though, of today's session, which is part of the Pink News yearly online Pride celebration, Pride for All, a festival that aims to offer activities and content so that everyone can attend Pride wherever you may be. So it's in support of LGBTQ plus refugees, and it's a fundraiser for those displaced by the war in Ukraine. There'll be a link to the fundraiser at the bottom of the screen, and really urge everyone watching to support LGBTQ plus siblings. Today's discussion is actually going to be about conversion therapy and its impact on survivors, as well as how LGBTQ plus people can safeguard against being subjected to this practice. And for that reason, I'd very much like to welcome Carolyn Mercer. And Carolyn, although I know a little bit about you, people out there may not, and I just wonder whether you'd be open to saying a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Iggy. I'd love to see you again.
You too.
I'm Carolyn. I usually introduce myself by saying I'm 74. I'm actually 75 next week. Professionally, I was a head teacher of a secondary school. I'm a partner. I'm a parent. I'm a grandparent. And I'm also trans history, which is how I describe myself. From the age of 3, 4, I knew that my gender identity and my gender presentation were at variance, and it took quite a while for me to correct that, which we may talk about later.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Today's topic about conversion therapy is really focusing on the idea of medical, psychiatric, psychological, religious, cultural, or any interventions that seek to change, to cure, or to suppress the sexual orientation and or gender identity of a person. And on the 31st of March, the government confirmed that it was dropping plans for a legislative ban on conversion therapy, 4 years after Theresa May promised to outlaw the practice. So LGBTQ plus community and equality groups and MPs from across the political spectrum have been outraged, and Boris Johnson changed his mind and said we would go ahead with the ban, but it would only cover cisgender, lesbian, gay and bisexual people, not trans people. So as you can imagine, the community is up in arms, and it's important to understand why conversion therapy is so damaging and why we want T back in the ban. Okay, so there are some areas that Carolyn and myself are going to talk about in relation to conversion therapy. But first of all, let's, Carolyn, talk about what do you think is the impact of a partial ban?
It's interesting, isn't it, when we talk about theory and legislation, you can have the academic side, you can have the professional side, but I suppose I'd like to speak mainly from the lived-in side that I suffered from, endured, survived. Hopefully, in other ways, I succeeded. Conversion therapy or conversion practice, because personally, I don't like talking about conversion therapy because it isn't therapy. It presupposes that I am wrong, I am dirty, I am evil, I need to be cured, and I can be cured. And none of those things apply. In the same way that I'm left-handed, it's part of my natural being. And in my day as a child, people were stopped from being left-handed by conversion practice. You were hit with sticks in schools. You had your arms tied to your side. And the damage that was done, George VI, for example, suffered a stammer. It is absolutely thought by psychiatrists and psychologists to be because of that conversion therapy that he endured as a youngster. Now, my experience is that I saw a psychiatrist, and the NHS provided treatment for me because I was told that it would help me. And that treatment doesn't happen now. I've got to emphasize that type of treatment, but nevertheless, the effects, which I'll talk about, are still there. That treatment was that I was strapped to a wooden chair, electrodes attached to my arm, and a picture of a female on the wall in front of me. And then the switch was thrown, and my body was racked with pain because of the electric current passing through me. My hand shot up in the air. What happened was that for the next 40 years, I physically shook every time I thought about it. I don't shake now. But also, because that taught me, emphasized to me that I was wrong, I was evil, I was dirty, I deserved to be punished for what I was, not for what I was doing, but for what I was. That treatment led me to have lack of self-esteem. That meant that my positive emotions were suppressed. Now, different forms of conversion therapy or conversion practice are taking place now, but the effects are the same. It's saying to you that you are wrong, you are dirty, you are evil, that you deserve to be punished, you must be changed, you must be cured. There's nothing to cure. It's as physically part of me as being left-handed. And it wasn't until 2000 that a psychiatrist said to me, look, you don't have to understand it. You just have to accept it. And I will help you, whatever you choose. That's the type of therapy that ought to be provided for people. And it's not that difficult, despite what the government say. Talking to me in a neutral way and saying to me, look, I will help you. I will be your counselor, your mentor, but I'm here to help you be who you are, who you choose to present yourself as. That's the therapy that's needed.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. From my stance, I've been very, very privileged to chair the MOU on conversion therapy, and we represent probably more now, but it was certainly 500,000 healthcare professionals, from psychiatrists, counsellors, psychotherapists, people who work in the healthcare professions. And actually, the original document that we were formed because of came from Mike King, who died quite recently, and Bartlett, who found that therapists were offering conversion therapy to their clients. So for us in mental health, we want gender and sexuality to be protected. We want that to happen in a way whereby all practitioners will be properly regulated. And that form of regulation, as we can see, we also have the Royal College of GPs. We can see from the organisations that everybody who is represented on the MOU desperately wants to make sure that they work ethically and that they work professionally. And that with that in mind,
what's needed.
And they do. And therefore, the regulatory bodies and anyone who signed up to the MOU will work ethically and professionally with the definition that we have made our own, if you like, which is about therapy. Now, I think we could say conversion therapy and or practices, but we do feel that there is room to say that therapeutic practice does need to be professional and ethical. And that's partly because the LGBT survey in 2018 found that 19% of lesbian, gay and bisexual people had been given conversion therapy by healthcare or medical professionals, but actually 29% of trans people have been given conversion therapy. We must bring an end to what has been named as an abhorrent practice. And I have to say, having worked with them,
just to be clear, the abhorrent practice is not being gay or trans. The abhorrent practice is what is being imposed as punishment.
Yes. As a punishment. And you know, the government have said they want to stop it. We cannot have the UK named as offering any form of torture. We know under Article 3 that you cannot alter in any way. It affects human rights, and we're working with the government. And I have to say, we've had very good support from MPs at all different levels, from a cross-party approach, who support bringing an end to conversion therapy. They want a ban on conversion therapy, as do we all. And I'm pretty sure that that is not located just in any particular party. That's cross-party. So that I hope establishes where we're at. Mm-hmm. Caroline, shall we go on to the? Sorry, shall we try and move on to the next question?
Me that it was only in 1988 that we had Section 28, Local Government Act, which prevented schools talking with young people about lesbian, gay, bisexual, or I suppose trans, but it didn't spell that out. And that's only 34 years ago. Now it was changed, repealed in 2003. And then the then Prime Minister, David Cameron, apologised for it in 2009. We now have the Secretary of State for Education saying that we shouldn't pander to trans children. I have a real feeling that we're going backwards, especially for young people. So excluding young people from what is proposed, even for lesbian, gay, bisexual, is saying that young people deserve to be punished. Is that the subtext? Or they don't have their own mind up to the age of 18? You can do lots of things. And if we look at the Gillick competence or whatever, that is way below 18, where a youngster can say, look, this is how I feel. This is who I am. Don't punish me. And similarly, consenting adults over 18 are being excluded from the ban. I was 17, 18. I gave permission to be strapped to a chair and electrocuted. Now, I repeat, that doesn't happen now, but conversion practice therapy does still take place with the results that I outlined. But I gave permission because society and government told me that I was wrong, that I was evil, that I was dirty. And if we exclude young people or give consent to this abhorrent treatment, that the government's words, the Prime Minister's words, then we are saying exactly that you are wrong. You can consent to torture, which, as you indicated under the United Nations, that is not permissible reason to accept torture.
And I think young people, I mean, our impact on the MOU is the concern on mental health. Now, we have a government that is very, very open to supporting mental health. The mental health of the nation is a priority. In making sure that we as citizens are healthy and able to be productive to some degree, and those that can't be productive need the support that they need. Now, young people need to be able to see role models, to feel supported, to feel that they have a livable life ahead of them. And we know right now from the LGBT survey that the people aged 16 to 24 who are transgender and non-binary and lesbian, gay and bisexual are the most at risk of being offered conversion therapy right now. And the two main places are Northern Ireland and London. So we know we have the details to go out there and do something about it. The idea that we are not able to support our young people is not actually plausible in a world where we are saying we want counsellors in the schools. Any child that's in distress must be able to talk openly about it, get the support that they need, and if parents need support as well, that they have somewhere to access either via the school or via any of the services that we have on the MOU, who work with parents, who work with children, who work with those that are very frightened of what transgender might mean, because we have to understand that for some people this is all very, very new and very scary, and we understand that. We have to be able to carry on with that work, not go, this is not actually a way forward, we must go back to the 1980s, when I also lived under a time when we had Section 28, and it was brutal, wasn't it, Carolyn? I mean, it was brutal. You weren't allowed to speak about your partner. You weren't allowed to talk about being gay. For some people, it was on the front of certain tabloid papers. As we see now, the hostility that can be ramped up, and it leaves people feeling very, very unsafe, very vulnerable, very mentally unwell, to the degree that they take their own life because their life is not livable. We cannot be responsible for that.
The treatment that I had as a 17, 18-year-old drove me to attempt suicide. It's difficult for me to talk about it, but the reality is that treatment did that to me. I was fortunate. I didn't succeed, and what a waste it would have been. And I wasn't a pupil under Section 28. I was a head teacher under Section 28, and I have to say that I ignored it. I really did. If a child came to me and talked about gay, lesbian, whatever, I would talk with them about it, and I would talk with them in a non-pejorative way. It's important that you start. You know better than I, Iggy, but you start from where the child or the adult is, and you talk with them about their feelings, not my feelings about it. I may have found it abhorrent. I didn't, but I may have done. That's not the issue. The issue is to help the mental health of that individual.
I agree. I agree, Caroline. And I think that there are some terms. I mean, I've been in my trade over 30 years now, and I'm pretty much aware that and I've trained psychologists, I've trained therapists, I've been trained, I've worked in lots of different settings, and I'm very, very impressed by the work of psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists who go through what is quite a rigorous training and are aware of how to sit and be with people. We all have our own ideas about how the world should be, but it's not for me to take those ideas into the session with a client. When a client comes in, if we're talking of, and let's face it, most people are in therapy because they feel some form of distress, or something's upsetting them, or something's leaving them feeling angry, or something's happened. And as a therapist, you're trained not just to theorize, but to sit with the skills that you learn, to sit with someone and listen to their story and help them to believe that where they're at may need to take some time to explore. And we all do it very, very well, and we do it in relation to gender, but it has to be with people that have had that in their training. And we can't remove that and say that transgender people, if a therapist does not want to work with transgender people, that's fine. But that is not about removing transgender people. That's about a therapist maybe needing to explore what that's about, or making the decision that this is not where they want to work. And that's fine too.
I would go further to say that if there's a therapist employed as a therapist who doesn't want to work with trans people, they shouldn't be a therapist.
Well, it's
is one element of me. No, it doesn't work like that. Fortunately, nowadays there is help available for people, and the best source of help, because in my day, of course, there wasn't an internet, there wasn't anything published. Ban Conversion Therapy, one word.com, is an excellent source of direction to various areas who can help you in a variety of ways. So Ban Conversion Therapy, one word.com, gives you that sort of index. Really worthwhile looking at.
And I think, Carolyn, it's we're not in the 80s. The idea that our lives could be banned because of who we were and what we did was back in the 80s. We saw through It's a Sin some of the things that happened, not all, but some of them. But now we do have a therapeutic context. We live in a world where young people who are struggling can be given maybe some support. It would be unbelievable to turn around now and say we're not going to offer therapy support to young people or adults who want to explore their gender. It would be abhorrent. It would be abhorrent. What about, Carolyn, people who say, well, I've given my consent. I'm not happy with where I'm at in terms of LGBT, and I've given my consent. Do you think that consent can be negotiated in that way?
Consent, for me, can be negotiated in terms of what I enjoyed rather than endured in 2000. I gave consent, I went along, and I received proper professional therapy. He wasn't judgmental about me. I said, look, I don't understand. My training as a teacher was in mathematics and divinity. If I couldn't calculate the answer, I could pray. But he didn't tackle that. He sidestepped and said, look, if you had diabetes, would you understand that any better? So I said, no. And his conclusion was, you don't have to understand it. You just have to accept it. I was doing some research for a presentation last week locally, and looking at the history, going back to 1533, the Buggery Act, which said that male homosexuals should be put to death. That was then changed in the 19th century to a minimum of 10 years in prison, and even an amendment to that said that you don't need evidence for that. So Oscar Wilde, for example, was put in prison simply on the basis of writing letters. Blackmailer's Charter it was named as. But we then come to 1921, when there was a move in Parliament to criminalise lesbianism. And they decided to withdraw the bill for two reasons. One is they didn't think there were many lesbians about. But secondly, it might encourage people to be lesbian. Now, I think some of the anti-trans diatribes, venom, which is coming out in the media, and unfortunately, I fear from government, with this obliteration of the possibility of a ban, is that they are concerned that they will have to put resources in, that there are more people now identifying as non-binary or trans. And I would bring them back to the point that I made about being left-handed. There are many more left-handed people now because they're not punished for being left-handed. And they're just allowed to be their natural self. There's a lovely song by Dory Previn talking about left hand loss. She was a successful songwriter and singer, married to Andre Previn. And she said in the song, I'm fine, I'm really fine. And she's not. And she says, I've been successful, but I've never painted a picture. I've never run for president. What could I have done if I had been allowed to be my natural self? And that's all I'm asking. I'm asking to be accepted. I demand respect and acceptance as a human being. I request acceptance and respect as a woman. Now, I'm fortunate that I've been given it. I've not had a single problem to my face. Not one, despite living in the same area, being in touch with 400 plus ex-pupils on Facebook, meeting them in the street, not one. It is amazing how fair people can be if you give them that opportunity.
I think you're right. I mean, going back to what we're speaking about, the idea that on the MOU we've been it's been said that we basically don't allow consent, but we do. We've actually made it very clear that there are bound to be people who feel that they do not want to be LGBT, and but we're not there to eradicate those feelings. We're there to say, let's sit with that discomfort. Let's if you're qualified and you're ethical, then within a context, you can sit with people and explore those feelings without wishing to eradicate those feelings. And in fact, there are versions of therapy whereby, for some people, it might be culture or religion, that people feel that they need support to help them hold what might well be feelings of same-sex attraction, but not act on them. And there's certainly versions of CBT which help that to happen. So we're very supportive on the MOU. All the organisations are very supportive of making sure that people are trained, that they're professional, that they know how to work with what are actually quite challenging presentations sometimes. But if the therapist themselves feels that something needs to be eradicated or removed, then we would ask that they explore what that might be about within themselves.
How do you feel? How do you feel if trans is continue to be excluded from this ban? How do you feel about the ban going forward in a partial way, or should we take steps to ditch the whole thing?
I think that would be. I mean, I could give a personal answer. I can't give an answer as chair of the MOU, because that would need to be a discussion with all the organisations. But personally, I think it would be rather difficult, as I identify as non-binary, to support a ban that isn't going to offer siblings who are trans any support. Or, I work with every day. I work with people who are at different stages of where they are at in terms of transition, or where they wish to be with transition. And I don't think any story is a repeat of the story that I've just heard. Everybody has their own life story. And I'm very, very privileged to hear that. But sometimes it's very painful. So I hear stories of people who don't have support from anybody. They don't know where to go. They don't know who to speak with. I have a young person who I work with who felt very upset when friends that they thought understood what they were going through, they realised didn't understand it. And you're talking of people's emotional world, their feelings, their way to get up in the morning. Yeah, some people feel that could be a reason not to want to go to school, not to want to go into work, not to want to get up and live your life. I am not going to condone that. I could not live with myself if I thought I'd given that any precedence.
I'm not representing any group, but just myself, and I've thought this one through tactically. It would make sense for us to push to ditch the whole bill. Then they have to reconsider it. But for an individual, it may damage them to the extent that they die through suicide or be attacked by other people. So regrettably, I would take the crumbs from the table, but it need not be. The government say that it's going to be difficult. Do it anyway because it's right. Complicated. Do it anyway because it's right. Our government advised Victoria State in Australia on their ban, several years ago. We taught them how to do it. Why can't we do it? The reason we can't do it is that they don't want to do it. I'm quite clear.
When we say, well, I would say two things to that really. One is Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland do want to do it.
All in favour.
They are working at finding a way to do it, and I feel that they are leading the way on making sure that there are protections in place, and within that, young people. I come back to this point that we have a duty to protect young people. They are our future, and in 2 years' time, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, it'll be 100 years since that was established, and we could really show our young people, our future, that they have their future to live in freedom. And my line has always been, young people who don't give a toss about this ban because they don't even know about it. They just want to get on living their life. They don't need to know what we have had to do to get a ban over the line, because we just want them to live their life. Also, the other point I want to make is that it's not all MPs at all who are against the ban. There are lots of people who want to see this ban happen for the right reason, but they want the wording of the ban to be right. It must be done properly. I think it can be done now. I think we've got all the things in place to make it happen. I think we just need to bring people together to push it over the line once and for all.
Accepting me for all my warts and all, as it were. I'm reminded by the banner going underneath that Pride for All is in support of LGBTQ plus refugees, particularly displaced by the war in Ukraine. We've got so many other things in the world to think about. Why does it matter to anyone else how I live, who I love? It shouldn't matter. And I should be protected from people telling me how to live my life, unless it damages other people. And I'm not a threat to other people. I'm me. I live a successful life, and with some help, maybe even happy. But I'm still working at that.
And don't you find, Carolyn, I mean, we both remember in our different ways how frightening it was to walk down the street holding the hand of the person that you love.
Yeah.
And that now we have an opportunity to make sure that that is not something that is felt for our young people or older people in the future. And I think we have to get this right, and we have to do it. I love my partner. I love it with all my heart. And to feel that somehow holding her hand is wrong, is somehow something that can be spat upon, as it was, shouted about, as it was, kicked, as we were, told we were filth, which we weren't. And at my age now, to be able to say, no more of that. I don't want our people to feel that anymore.
Nothing the government does can take away the pain I endured or compensate me for lifelong self-hatred. But I'm going to do whatever I can, and I expect them to do whatever they can to protect this generation and future generations.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull the ladder away. You can't touch me now. No matter what you do, I've lived my life. I've got to 75 or thereabouts, and hopefully going to live some longer and get enjoyment out of it. But young people and older people. They deserve our efforts. They deserve the government to recognise them as human beings with their rights, with their obligations, but with their rights. They don't deserve to be punished. They don't deserve the pejorative press that is taking place on a daily basis. I saw the Daily Mail 3 days ago, and it had, for half a day, no anti-trans articles. Every other time I looked on their website, I have found not one, I found 7 on one page. Half a day without that constant, it seems, attack. Not anything I've done to injure people, not shot people, hit people, abused people, just for being me.
Let's say, I mean, I would, looking at what advice would we give to those who are being forced to undergo conversion therapy and the safeguarding. I mean, I believe that if people do want therapy, then find yourselves a person who is regulated, who belongs to one of the main organisations. If they're a psychiatrist, the Royal College of Psychiatrists. If they're a GP, the Royal College of GPs. A psychologist, the British Psychological Society. UKCP, BACP, and we have trans-led organisations, Mermaids, Clinic Q, Gendered Intelligence, Spectra, Albert Kennedy Trust. These organisations, talk to them, ask them, make sure that you're working with people who basically have your interests at heart and can show you the direction of travel if you need protection. I'm not saying they've all got it right. I'm pretty sure we can all do a lot more. But everybody on the MOU wants there to be regulation, wants there to be ethical practice, wants professionalism, and wants to make sure that everybody who actually is a healthcare professional acts ethically with LGBTQIA plus people. And that we are all dedicated to. And we accept there's a lot more to do, but we are going to do it. I don't know if you know, if there's anything you want to add, Carolyn. And
just a couple of things to repeat what I said earlier about BAN Conversion Therapy, oneword.com, good source of information. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for people to treat me humanly and humanely. I don't want anything more than that. I don't think that's too much to ask. And I don't think the legislators can deny me that. We must keep fighting.
And I don't think they want to. I think the regulators also are on board. I really do feel that this is something that the majority do want, that the majority want conversion therapy to be banned. You know, and the organisations that I know of, all of them want that to happen. And they're all dedicated to it happening. And but when the consultation was sent out, everybody that I know who answered the consultation document wanted trans to be included. All the regulators felt that, okay, we can work with the wording of the ban. It might not be perfect, but as it is, we can work with government to make sure that this is rolled out and we will all work together. And I would beg that that continues and that we do include trans, and that the wording of the ban, even if we stay with the wording that was in the consultation, is back in place. And that, you know, there are plenty of MPs who do want the ban to happen. Let's hope that it does, and that we can move forward in a positive way and have something. You know, we've just had the Jubilee. You know, we've just had COVID. We've just had a very bad time. We've had some good times. We want there to be celebration in the future. We want our people to feel optimistic that their children, who may well be transgender, non-binary, lesbian or gay, can feel happy in the world. Life, like we know, is so terribly short. It doesn't matter what happens to me. Like with your saying, I've done what I've done. I've been a fighter for rights, LGBT rights, all my life, and that's how it will always be. And I think both of us have experienced enough pain in our life to know that some people near us who didn't find their lives livable felt that this world was not for them. The pain that leaves behind. If your child wants to be transgender or non-binary, and you're saying, I don't know how I'm going to manage that, I would ask you to ask yourself how you will feel when that child is no longer in this world. Because I'll tell you now, the pain of that is far beyond the pain of your child wanting to be transgender or non-binary.
That's a good way to wrap up. My view is that unless trans is included, unless young people are included, unless we remove the permission element, unless we include non-binary, blood will be on the hands of politicians. I'm done with it.
Thank you. Me too.